Out front next, breaking news. Mueller's work is almost done. That's the word from the acting Attorney General of the United States tonight. This is the White House refuses to answer what Trump knew about Roger Stone and Russian-linked WikiLeaks. Plus, shutdown 2.0. Trump saying it's totally possible to shut the government down again. And Kamala Harris face-to-face with voters tonight here on CNN. Will she pass this first major test? Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, the breaking news, major developments in the Russia investigation on several fronts. First, Mueller's investigation coming to a close. This according to the president's acting attorney general, who spoke to reporters just a short time ago.
You know, I've been fully briefed on the investigation, and, I look forward to Director Mueller delivering the final report. But right now, the investigation is, I think, close to being completed, and I hope that we can get the report from Director Mueller as soon as possible.
Close to being completed. It's a huge statement to make. Usually there's no comments ever that would come out about an ongoing investigation. So that's unusual in and of itself. Keep in mind, Mueller's been on the job for 20 months. So far, he has charged 6 Trump associates: Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen, George Papadopoulos, and Roger Stone. All in, Mueller has charged 37 people and entities with about 200 criminal counts, the majority of those cases against the Russians who attacked the United States during the election. This major development comes as the White House tonight is unable to answer a crucial question about Roger Stone's effort to get dirt on Hillary Clinton from Russian-linked WikiLeaks and how high those contacts went in the Trump campaign. Remember, according to the 24-page indictment of the president's longtime friend Roger Stone, Mueller writes, after the July release of stolen Democratic National Committee emails by WikiLeaks, a senior Trump campaign official was directed to contact Stone about additional releases and damaging information WikiLeaks had regarding Clinton. So tonight we're still in the dark about that crucial line. Who was the person who ultimately wanted Stone to go get more dirt? The person who is more senior than a senior campaign official who worked on the Trump campaign. Well, today the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, was asked that by our Jim Acosta.
Can you assure the American people that during these conversations that Roger Stone had with WikiLeaks and individuals who were tied to the dumping of that material, that at no time the president had any interactions with Roger Stone, that nobody close to the president had interactions with Roger Stone who may have told the president what was going on in those conversations? All of this, when it comes to Roger Stone, is a complete surprise to the president. He didn't know about any of this. Is that what you're saying?
What I can tell you is that the president did nothing wrong throughout this process, and the charges of the indictment against Mr. Stone have absolutely nothing to do with the president.
Of course, that didn't answer the question. And while we do not know Mueller's exact timeline for completing the Russia investigation, other than that he's close, according to the acting Matt Whitaker, we do know that the president's former fixer, Michael Cohen, has now formally agreed to testify before the House Intelligence Committee next week. Now, we have a lot of developments to get to tonight. I want to start with Evan Perez out front live in Washington at this hour. So, Evan, close to complete, highly unusual for someone like Matt Whitaker to speak out and say that about an ongoing investigation. What does it mean for Mueller?
That's right. I think it's very unusual for Matt Whitaker to be the one saying this. You've already heard from some of the Democrats on Capitol Hill who are saying, well, we want to hear it from Mueller himself. Mueller should be the one that speaks for this investigation. But look, I think as you saw from that video clip, it's not clear that Whitaker was intending to say this. He kind of stumbled a little bit, but he did say it. And so this could be a sign that, the major investigative work is being wrapped up, is almost done, that there might not be any other major figures that Mueller himself will be bringing any charges for. But look, we don't know, Aaron, how much longer Mueller has before he hands over his report. We don't even know whether Matt Whitaker will be the man who will be handling this, because as you remember, Bill Barr is the nominee for Attorney General. We expect that he's going to be confirmed in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and he probably will be the one who will handle this report when this is all said and done. So there's a lot of questions that are still left unanswered. And we also don't know whether there's any parts of this investigation that Mueller has himself decided belong in other parts of the Justice Department, at the Eastern District of Virginia, in the Southern District of New York, which we've seen them do already. So there's a lot of questions that are still unanswered, including, obviously, the central question about what exactly happened in 2016. We expect that that's going to be addressed in the report. But if there's any additional crimes that need investigating that go beyond Mueller's initial scope, perhaps those will be handled by U.S. attorneys' offices, the Justice Department, and Matt Whitaker said as much in his comments today.
All right. Thank you very much, Evan, which obviously is crucial because, everyone should remember, right, Michael Cohen's going to prison for 3 years because of the Southern District of New York, right? So a referral can obviously have hugely significant implications. Out front now, Chief Political Correspondent Dana Bash, former Nixon White House counsel John Dean, and White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Network's April Ryan. Dana, let me start with you. Whitaker has been fully briefed. He says Bob Mueller's almost done. I think, as Evan pointed out, he appeared to stumble, maybe realizing he shouldn't be saying that, but nonetheless, say it, he did.
Say it, he did, and that was, revealing, certainly. But what was alarming to some Democrats on the Hill, and maybe even some Republicans, is the other part of his comment, Aaron, and that is that he said that the Mueller report is being reviewed, that he's reviewing it. Senator Chris Coons told our colleague Manu Raju, and I spoke with him as well, that is something that is raising many, many alarm bells among him and fellow Democrats on the Judiciary Committee in particular, because it opens up the question of, okay, if he's reviewing it, what does that mean? Is he censoring it? Is he telling the White House about it? What exactly are the specifics of that review? And you can be sure those follow-up questions are going to be asked.
Absolutely, because they all want to see it, and they want the American public to see it, right? I mean, I know we've got obviously some bipartisan efforts to that, and we'll see what happens. I mean, April, you were in the room today when Sarah Sanders was asked questions about the investigation, right? Specifically referring to Stone and what Trump did or didn't tell Stone to do, right? And she simply would not answer them, and they were repeated.
I even asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders, is the president in contact with mutual friends who are possibly friends with those who are indicted, preferably Roger Stone? And she says, I'm not sure of that. And the question was asked because are these people taking information, these mutual friends taking information from a Roger Stone or Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort back to the president? And she says, I'm not aware of that. But they're trying to make sure that they walk a very fine line because at that time, if we know correctly, they may not have known that the investigation was probably over. But also, I have a little news, too, as well. Apparently, before Roger Stone was, his house was raided by the FBI just hours before, he had several influencers from Trump's circle of friends at his home for a gathering. And some who were there were wondering if the FBI actually was there watching as they were there for this gathering. And that kind of led me into that question today about that. And she just said, I don't know. I have not heard anything about that. She doesn't believe that's happening.
Interesting when as you report on that, on a gathering like that, obviously significant and raises significant questions.
Yes.
I mean, John Dean, I want to play a little bit more of what Whitaker had to say about where the investigation goes. Here he is.
Fundamentally, the Mueller investigation has a very defined scope, and so anything outside of that scope would have to be enhanced to bring additional matters to be investigated by the Mueller investigation. But obviously, if it's not given to that investigation by an increasing in the scope of the investigation, it would be retained by the Department of Justice.
John, obviously big questions here because, in light of the whole situation with Roger Stone, right, that a senior campaign official was directed to tell Roger Stone to go get the dirt from the Russian-linked WikiLeaks, right? We don't know who that person is. Obviously, it begs the question of whether it's the president of the United States and what that means. It sounds like what Whitaker is saying is that even when Mueller is done, the DOJ can continue to investigate. The question for you, John Dean, though, is would Donald Trump's DOJ do that?
Well, that's a good question. I was focusing as well on what Dana said earlier, and that part of his remarks, which caught my attention, where he said, I'm comfortable that the decisions that were made are going to be reviewed. I'm not quite sure what that meant. And then he also added, right now, you know, the investigation is, I think, close to being completed. You know, I think he was trying to nudge Mueller and try to tell Mueller, you know, well, I'm still here and I'm still looking over your shoulder and I might be making some decisions.
Dana,
So that's the only way I could read that.
Dana, what are the fears right now from everyone you're speaking to on Capitol Hill about what it means if he's really saying you know, I'm close to being complete. Look, it could be a bluff, right? It could be a trying to nudge, or it could be real. But nonetheless, it's the first time we've heard it. So for some on Capitol Hill, that's a huge concern.
Right. And but really the word review is the big concern among some of the Democrats. The concern that review means interfere, frankly.
Right,
and
interfere or change or redact or something.
And he has been overseeing the Mueller investigation, you know, for some time. And at least on the public face of it, it doesn't look like he has interfered, because we have the Stone indictment. We have other things that have happened since Whitaker has been in charge, since Sessions was fired. But we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes with regard to Mueller wrapping up, Whitaker looking at what he has. Again, the concern among some on Capitol Hill that he's, you know, doing more than sending a signal, but telegraphing in a more direct, detailed way to the White House in a way that may not be appropriate. Now, those are fears that we don't know if that's true, but certainly the way that Whitaker answered the question fanned those fears.
And John, you also have, you know, when you're talking about, first of all, the big question of who directed Roger, the senior campaign official to direct Roger Stone, right? That person seems to be very important. We don't know who it is. We assume Mueller does, and that there's something up his sleeve we don't know about that. We also now know Michael Cohen is going to be testifying to the House Intelligence Committee, right, which he had withdrawn and citing fears for his family. Now he's going to go back and do that, and he's going to do it next week. So the timing on that is also very important.
I would encourage him to also resume his testimony in front of the House Oversight Committee and do it publicly. He says he's worried about his family. There's nothing better he can do than go public with his testimony. I can tell you from personal experience, as somebody who lived under death threats, who people didn't know my testimony at the time, and the best thing I could have done is what I did, was testify openly. And while I was under the witness protection program, it certainly, nobody had any mystery in their mind anymore about what I had to say.
You know, it's interesting. In April, I will say one thing today with Sarah Sanders repeatedly saying, oh, the president did nothing wrong, or evading the question. One thing she did not say was, I refer you to Rudy Giuliani, to the attorneys. And an interesting change in tack of what we're used to hearing.
Well, number one, Rudy Giuliani has been the fly in the ointment for them at the White House. He doesn't consult with them, and he's now has confounded more so the situation. He needs to stop talking. And the White House has been hopeful that he will stop talking. But I want to go back to something that you said. I talked to a former Justice Department, high-ranking Justice Department official who said about this investigation, one thing that could really reopen this for Mueller if he comes back, if he were to come back to probe more, is the fact that Manafort and Stone would just completely, I guess, cooperate. And that's one thing that could reopen this and could really change the dynamic as well.
Which would be crucial. And of course, Stone saying that he will do no such thing, whether that's betting on a pardon or what, unclear. Thank you all very much. And next, President Trump refusing to rule out another shutdown. Is he getting his wall one way or the other? Plus, the White House reportedly nervous about another Republican running for president against Trump. The governor of Maryland, is he really a threat? Plus, NBC just releasing a statement after veteran journalist Tom Brokaw made controversial comments, including this.
The Hispanics should work harder at assimilation.
President Trump refusing to rule out another shutdown. The president telling the Wall Street Journal today that he thinks the odds are against a deal happening. So, for another shutdown or, well, of course, there's always executive action. He said we could see another shutdown in less than 3 weeks. And of course, then there is this.
Is the president really prepared to shut down the government again in 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think he actually is. Keep in mind, he's willing to do whatever it takes to secure the border.
What does he say to those like Republican Rob Portman and others who say that a shutdown should be taken off the table?
I'm not going to get into the hypotheticals of taking that off the table.
Okay, so the shutdown is on the table. The president thinks the odds of no deal are higher than the odds of a deal. And it came on the day we found out that it has cost the United States $3 billion for the shutdown. That's according to the CBO. And only 20% of Americans actually support shutting down the government again. That is a bipartisan and overwhelmingly resounding statement. People don't want it. Caitlin Collins is out front at the White House tonight. And Caitlin, that is the big question. The president dangling out there again, right? Are we headed for another shutdown?
Yeah, and that's really the question here. But what it's going to come down to, Aaron, is largely two things. One, whether or not those congressional negotiators can find a deal, not just finding a deal, but also one that could pass both chambers of Congress and get the president's signature. Now, as you noted in that Wall Street Journal interview, he expressed doubt that they could come to a deal. But the president isn't the only one who's skeptical here, because both sides have drawn these red lines. Not only the president saying he doubts he'd take anything less than $5.7 billion, but also with the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi being on camera calling the wall an immorality. Now, the one bright spot that White House aides have looked at lately is who's on this committee that's trying to find a deal, and it's none of the hardliners. Mostly you see these appropriators here who are used to finding a compromise and have said they would like to do so for this. Now, if they don't reach a deal and they don't reach one that either Nancy Pelosi likes or the president likes, then the president has said that his top choice essentially here is to invoke a national emergency, therefore bypassing Congress to fund his border wall. So that's the question here. One thing we did learn today, Aaron, is that the president will get the chance to make the argument for his border wall during that televised primetime address during the State of the Union, which is going to be 1 week after it was initially scheduled to happen.
All right, Caitlin, thank you. Out front tonight, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. And I appreciate your time, Congressman. Look, the president is putting the odds at less than 50-50 that the bipartisan group of congressional negotiators will get a deal before there's another shutdown. So he has the odds for a shutdown. Where do you put them?
Well, that's very discouraging. I think we can get a deal done. The Democrats are willing to fund border security. We're willing to fund smart border security, even give more than $5.7 billion. We would give $10 billion, but we're not going to give money for the 15th century idea of a wall. And I think the president, if he can move beyond his campaign promises, could easily get a reasonable deal.
So, you know, in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, the president said he would not rule out another shutdown, right? His quote, certainly an option. That's what he used to describe another shutdown. Now, look, we know from the most recent polls, Americans overwhelmingly don't want that outcome, according to Monmouth, right? That is a bipartisan take from people across the country. Do you believe the president will go ahead with another shutdown? Does he think that that's a real alternative?
I don't, for two reasons. One, the polling showed that it was unpopular for him. But more importantly, his own economic advisor said that it was costing the country 0.13% of GDP every week. The president knows that he's nowhere if this economy falls into recession or tanks. I just don't think he's going to take that kind of risk again.
So when you talk about being willing to give something for border security, but not a wall, look, this is what it all comes down to. Sometimes words are not just words. Sarah Sanders today was asked about it. She said that you all, Democrats, need to give something. Here she is.
If they don't come back with a deal, that means Democrats get virtually nothing. That will make the president and force him to have to take executive action that does not give Democrats the things that they want.
Will you vote for a deal, Congressman Khanna, that includes some wall?
I will not, and I think the president is miscalculating his odds on executive action. I mean, Senator Rubio, Senator Blunt have said that they would not support the president in declaring a national emergency. And as you know, we could invoke Section 5 of the National Emergency Act, and the Congress could pass a joint resolution to overturn it. Now, it would require a veto-proof majority, but the question is whether Senator Rubio and Blunt and others would stick to what they said they would do.
Well, of course, Senator Graham has already said he supports a national emergency. I mean, you know, I guess the reality of it is, are you willing to take one?
Well, I would vote to overturn it, and I think it's clearly unconstitutional. I mean, in Harry Truman, when he declared a national emergency to nationalize steel for the Korean War, the court said that that was unconstitutional. So certainly this is not going to be a constitutional exercise of the president's power. But here's the point. We're all for reasonable border security, and the president, if he just gets past the wall and if he thinks about what's common sense, can get a deal. I mean, people say, well, Ro, you have borders, you have security in your own house, but I don't build a wall around my house. I have an alarm system. I represent Silicon Valley. They're technology solutions that are effective, and my hope is the president will see that.
Now, of course, the president points at communities, whether it's LA or San Francisco or anywhere across this country, and says, well, they have walls too. And in fact, when he, gave in here, right? There's no other word for it, right? He caved, and the government reopened, and he didn't get any money for his wall at that time. He was slammed by his base for doing that. Here are a couple of people.
He promised something for 18 months, and he lied about it.
She has just whipped the president of the United States. He just reversed himself. That's a victory for Nancy Pelosi.
Okay, when he hears that from people that he cares deeply about, he cares what they think about him, he cares that they reflect what he thinks his base wants, do you think that will make him dig in even more? He doesn't want to look like a loser.
Unfortunately, they're calling the shots, and this is the base that he thinks got him elected. But leadership is about convincing your base to do something that makes sense for the country. The president, everyone knows, has a lot of loyalty from his base. His poll numbers are through the roof still with that 40% of the country that voted for him. I think if he turned to them and said, look, I'm getting border security, we're getting funding for smart border security, and it doesn't have to be about a 15th century wall, I actually think the vast majority of his base would stay with him. So I think he is over-reliant on the Ann Coulters and isn't doing what would the vast majority of the country wants.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Congressman Khan. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me on.
And next, is the president trying to bait former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz into running for president? Plus, a longtime Republican lawmaker switching parties while he's saying it's all because of President Trump and he's doing it now. He's out front. Tonight, the first big test for Senator Kamala Harris, moments away. She will be facing voters in Iowa at the CNN town hall in Des Moines. It is just one day after she officially announced she is running.
I'm running to be president of the people, by the people, and for all people.
Jeff Zeleny is out front. He's in Des Moines. And Jeff, this is obviously a big night. And in many senses, formally kicking off 2020, this town hall. The stakes are high for Senator Harris tonight.
Aaron, good evening. No question they are. I mean, after we heard that speech yesterday in her hometown of Oakland, California, laying out her vision, giving her slogan, she's of the people, now she's going to be taking questions from the people. She's going to be taking questions from Iowa voters. And Aaron, I can tell you, talking to so many Iowa Democrats and independent and other voters, they are curious about policy positions. They are curious if these Democratic candidates, this growing field of candidates, has what it takes to ultimately do the top objective, that is to defeat Donald Trump. So this, no question, is the beginning of a process to do that. She's had a very smooth rollout over the last week or so. It's been multi-stops. Well, it's stopping here tonight in Iowa, and she's going to be taking those questions. But there are some concerns about where she stands on some of the issues. Is she as liberal or progressive as some of the other candidates in the field? If she is, would that hurt her in a general election? So this is the beginning of organizing. It's shopping season for Democrats here. They want to pick a winner. All that makes up is, a lot of ingredients, that it's just the beginning phases. A lot of voters we talk to say, is she going to be like Barack Obama? Can the party have another Barack Obama? Aaron, it's a good thing to keep in mind. Barack Obama announced about 12 years ago this very week. He had a lot of ups and downs as well. So it's how you survive the long stretch here, not simply one of these evenings. It's the long obstacle course.
And it is one long runway we have. It's like, all right. Thank you very much, Jeff Zeleny. And I want to go now to Joan Walsh, national affairs correspondent for The Nation, along with Bill Kristol, former editor of the Weekly Standard. So, Joan, the top objective, they want to beat Donald Trump. Yes. So what does Harris need to do tonight in Iowa? As Jeff said, right, you can have your ups and downs, but tonight's a crucial night for her.
It is a crucial night. I think it's very good that she went to Iowa first after Oakland, Aaron. I think that there were some rumors for a while. I mean, it's still early, but early, that maybe she wasn't going to be serious about Iowa. She would look ahead to Nevada and South Carolina, which are demographically better for her. But Iowa's crucial. I mean, Iowa actually
sets the tone.
It sets the tone.
belief.
You can't neglect Iowa. It also, Iowans are very proud, Iowa Democrats, of sort of credentialing Barack Obama when they gave him that big win in 08, that actually liberated a lot of black voters to take him seriously and say, wait, maybe white people are going to give him a serious chance. He could be a winner. So, I hate to keep comparing her to Obama, but there is that comparison. She also has to introduce herself. California has a lot of rural voters, so it's not like she's just an urban person. She represents just an urban area, but she's got to introduce herself to those rural, working-class white Iowans and make it clear that she cares about them, too.
So Bill, when it comes to this issue of, as Jeff said, the top objective, right, for Democrats, they want to beat Donald Trump. So, okay, you got all kinds of issues going on here in a crowded field, including the former CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, who now is, quote unquote, seriously thinking about running, but he would not run as a Democrat. No, Bill. He would run as an independent. And the backlash has been swift and nasty. This exchange just happened at a book event for Schultz in New York, literally just moments ago as the show was on the air. Here it is.
I am seriously considering running for president as a centrist independent. And I wanted to clarify the word independent, which I view merely as a designation on the ballot. And
Don't help elect Trump, you egotistical billionaire.
Okay, Bill. So, look, obviously, Andrew Ross Sorkin, my friend there, the excellent moderator, moved the conversation along. But now this is what they're talking about here, right? And this is the sentiment we have seen everywhere, whether it's included expletives or not. We've seen it. Michael Bloomberg said Schultz running would split the anti-Trump vote. Democratic Senator Brian Schatz said there's zero appetite for this. And those were the polite ways it was framed. Would Schultz be catastrophic for Democrats?
Yeah, that reminds me of a book event. I think I once did at that same Barnes & Noble in New York. So I guess the lesson is don't do book events in New York. But look, I respect Howard Schultz, and let's see what he has to say. I mean, I think the bet would have to be that the Democrats go far left and nominate Bernie Sanders, who I think would be unacceptable or would scare off a fair number of Democrats, of Hillary Clinton voters, and the Republicans nominated weakened Donald Trump, and maybe you can run up the middle and get 35, 40% and actually win. I mean, Bloomberg looked at this carefully, but I don't think unless there's a Sanders nomination, I suspect Schultz at some point would decide that a reasonable Democrat is better than Donald Trump. I mean, he's a Democrat himself. It's not even clear what he disagrees with the National Democratic Party on that much, except he's a little tougher on the debt and the deficit, which is fine with me, but I don't know that you can really. I do agree that if you're any kind of Democrat or any kind of independent or any kind even of some Republicans who switched in 2018, are you going to risk leaving Donald Trump in office to cast what might just be a symbolic vote for Howard Schultz?
I would have to agree with that. But look, people are angry. This man purports to be a lifelong Democrat, then run in the Democratic primary. The field isn't formed yet. I don't think Bernie Sanders is going to get the nomination, but he will probably be there. There is room for a centrist who's maybe a deficit hawk. That's not my lane in the party, but there are still moderates in the party. Run and show your ideas. I would also add, though, even though people are afraid of him because of all the money and because of the stakes.
He can afford to self-fund.
He can afford to self-fund. He was terrible on 60 Minutes last night. We all remember, some of us remember, that poor Ted Kennedy doomed his 80 campaign with a terrible 60 Minutes performance. Howard Schultz was soporific on 60 Minutes. He really should have had like a triple latte before he went on. And all day we've been contrasting his rollout on 60 Minutes, not official, with Kamala Harris, with the energy of Kamala Harris. I don't know what his constituency is, but he didn't convince anybody last night.
Well, his constituency, for certain, Bill, appears to be Donald Trump, who said Howard Schultz doesn't have the guts to run for president. Obviously trying to goad him into running for president, because Donald Trump obviously perceives this would be a great thing, split the anti-Trump vote, and you get another term of Donald J. Trump.
I think the Trump team understands he's not increasing his support at all. It's going to go down from the 46% last time, even if he wins the nomination. And I've been struck, being involved on the Republican side and trying to lay the groundwork for a primary challenge to Trump, how panicked they are even about that. They're trying to rig the rules with the Republican National Committee. They're worried about what's happening in the early primary states. I think Trump is weak, and so that's another reason I think the Democrats, sensing that they have a reasonable path to victory here with a pretty impressive field, a diverse field, but, a lot of interesting choices there. They don't really see why Howard Schultz is going out, especially now. I mean, if in the summer both parties are really unpopular, Pelosi and Trump are in some death match and no one likes either of them, that's one thing.
Right.
It's a little strange for Schultz to launch now, I think.
All right.
Agreed.
By the way, the outcome of Trump and Pelosi, very possible to see. I don't know that it leads you to a third-party candidate, but possible death match. All right, thank you both very much. And coming up later, don't miss the town hall with Kamala Harris, live in Iowa, 10 o'clock Eastern, right here on CNN. And next, a longtime Republican quitting the GOP. Why he says President Trump has taken the party to the extreme. He's out front. Plus, NBC moments ago addressing the backlash Tom Brokaw caused after this.
Also, I hear when I push people a little harder, I don't know whether I want brown grandbabies. I mean, that's also a part of it.
This is CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Tonight, a longtime Republican lawmaker leaving the party and becoming a Democrat. His main reason, the president, who he claims has, quote, led the Republican Party to the extreme on issues that divide our country. Out front now, California Assemblyman Brian Mainshine. Assemblyman, I appreciate the time. Look, you're not new to politics. You were in the legislature for 6 years. You served in a city council for San Diego for 8 years. What was the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to President Trump for you?
It's been so much. When I started my career on the San Diego City Council, I wanted to get things done and solve problems. And I've watched as the Republican Party has moved further and further to the right. And then under President Trump, it's just become so strident and filled with so much vitriol that I just didn't feel comfortable continuing to serve under that banner.
So, when you talk about the stridency, vitriol moving to the right, the one thing I would say, my question for you, though, is that some of these things we heard a long time before now. Right here is then candidate Donald Trump.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Obviously, that was 2015. So at that time, you were willing to deal with that. But now something's changed. So what has happened between then and now?
I just think it's reached a breaking point with people refusing to stand up to that. And it's been sort of more strident. His staff is fleeing, and the chaos kind of that really comes out of that White House on a daily basis. There's a lot of people who wanted the Republican Party, particularly in California, but really anywhere else, to change, to become have more of an open tent, and yet it just continues to not. And at some point, I wanted to take a stand against that, and it's been, I'll tell you, the reception has been really nice locally for somebody to stand up to that behavior.
So when you talk about the reception locally being nice, I want to ask you about something one of your colleagues said. The chairman of the San Diego Republican Party, actually, pretty critical of you, right? You won in November. I want to be clear. You were reelected. It was a really tight race, 607 vote margin in your favor. And the chairman of the San Diego Republican Party has said about your decision to leave the Republican Party for the Democratic Party, quote, Brian Mainshine has shown himself to be the absolute worst kind of politician, someone making decisions based on politics instead of principles, referring to your district turning more Democratic, saying you're just doing it to win. What do you say to him?
Well, I mean, it's not surprising that the chairman of the Republican Party would say that. What I'm talking about is just more kind of the regular people that I want to represent. I mean, the constituents in my district, they want a problem solver. They want somebody who's there to represent them, not to be an ideologue and say those terrible things, the clip you showed. And, there's 100 other clips that are pretty similar to that could be shown too. So no, I'm not surprised that the chairman of the Republican Party feels that way, or at least says that. But again, they've been ones who have been resistant to change, to not having an open tent, to not wanting to attract people and appeal to the best in people, but to continue to appeal to the worst in people.
We're leading into our town hall here with Kamala Harris, sort of launching the 2020 season, right? And now you've switched parties, right? We've got 5 Democrats who have officially entered the race for 2020. Kamala Harris among them. We've got others who are likely to do so, right? Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand. Look, you could even have Howard Schultz as an independent. Who knows? The point is, when you look up there at all of these choices, would you be willing to vote for one of these people for president?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the big key is going to be to change the White House. And so absolutely, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fantastic primary campaign. I think there's going to be a ton of good candidates out there. This is the first step in Iowa, but it's going to be pretty exciting.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Aaron. You bet.
And next, NBC News calling Tom Brokaw's comments about Hispanics assimilating and brown babies inaccurate and inappropriate. Are they taking any action? Plus, Jeannie Mose on Roger Stone, guilty for crimes against fashion. Tonight, NBC News weighing in on controversial remarks made by veteran anchor Tom Brokaw about Hispanics, releasing a statement moments ago saying Tom's comments were inaccurate and inappropriate, and we are glad he apologized. Brian Stelter is out front.
Hispanics should work harder at assimilation. That's one of the things I've been saying for a long time.
Veteran TV journalist Tom Brokaw now trying to walk that back, apologizing for his statements about Latinos not fitting in to American culture. Now, dozens of Latino leaders are demanding more from NBC, saying his comments are part of a legacy of anti-Latino sentiment that is spreading freely in 2019.
A lot of this we don't want to talk about.
Brokaw, speaking on Sunday's Meet the Press, said many Republicans see the growth of Hispanics in the U.S. helping Democrats.
Also, I hear when I push people a little harder, I don't know whether I want brown grandbabies. I mean, that's also a part of it.
There, with talk of racial animus, he upset some on the right, like Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush, who tweeted, "I am one of those little brown ones, and I was loved by my grandparents." What Brokaw said next about conflicting cultures stirred even more anger.
They ought not to be just codified in their communities, but make sure that all of their kids are learning to speak English and that they feel comfortable in the communities. And that's going to take outreach on both sides, frankly.
What many people heard was an old and unfair stereotype.
We also need to adjust what we think of them as America.
PBS correspondent Yamiche Alcindor pushed back on Brokaw.
I grew up in Miami where people speak Spanish, but their kids speak English. Yeah. And the idea that we think of American can only speak English as if Spanish and other languages wasn't always part of America is some ways troubling.
The show moved on, but the conversation was just beginning. Brokaw, who covered the civil rights movement, seemed out of touch with America today. Texas Democrat Joaquin Castro called the comments xenophobic and called Brokaw stunningly ignorant of Hispanic culture. When Brokaw first expressed regret, tweeting, "I feel terrible, a part of my comments on Hispanics offended some members of that proud culture," the National Association of Hispanic Journalists called Brokaw's comments inaccurate and slammed him, saying, "It only further demonstrates Brokaw's lack of understanding of what forced assimilation does to communities." The 78-year-old special correspondent continued tweeting, saying, "I am sorry, truly sorry, my comments were offensive to many. The great enduring American tradition of diversity is to be celebrated and cherished." Now some of Brokaw's colleagues are coming to his defense, Joe Scarborough saying hopefully he will be shown grace. Meantime, an alliance of Latino groups wants NBC to do more to show the changing face of America. A nation of immigrants, of course, a nation where so many people, Aaron, work so hard to overcome huge struggles and obstacles in order to assimilate. It's part of what makes America great. Brokaw didn't seem to get that. Of course, as always, it's about media diversity. Let's hear less from Brokaw about this and more from Hispanics. That, I think, is an option and an opportunity for NBC.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. And next, Jeannie Mose calls the fashion police on Roger Stone. Tonight, Roger Stone and the fashion police collide. Here's Jeannie.
I don't know. Whether he's giving an interview or flashing the peace sign, it's not just what Roger Stone is doing, it's what he's wearing while doing it that sticks. While Nancy Pelosi takes her sunglasses off to talk to the press, Stone puts them on.
Yeah, I'm going to put these on because otherwise I'll... Yeah, I don't blame you.
But some blame him for wearing a top hat to President Trump's inauguration. Stone was compared to villain Snidely Whiplash and Mr. Peanut. He considers himself a dapper dresser with his pocket squares and round glasses, even on his legal defense fund page. But when he wears his beret, he tends to get berated. Makes me wonder why he wasn't arrested sooner for his incriminating fashion choices.
Mano a mano.
Stone's beret and leather jacket make you want to pull a Paul Manafort with his ostrich jacket and bury your head in the sand. But the most famous part of Roger Stone's look is what he wears under his clothes.
The Nixon tattoo is really all you need to know about Roger.
The tattoo is featured in the documentary Get Me Roger Stone. It's gotten Stone parodied by political cartoonists and lampooned by the Borowitz Report. In ominous development for Trump, Roger Stone gets Mueller tattoo. Stone is actually the men's fashion correspondent for conservative website The Daily Caller. His best-dressed list for 2018 featured Melania and Trump Fox News favorite Jeanine Pirro. His worst-dressed list included Beto O'Rourke, dweeby, washed out, Stone called him, and he trashed Michael Cohen for his garish sports jackets. Not that Stone would ever wear such a thing. Wonder what he was wearing when the FBI, rather than the fashion police, woke him up and said, "You're under arrest." Jeannie Moe, CNN, New York.
Yeah, see, you saw that tattoo, huh? Anderson starts now.